Joining me is Nationals frontbencher Barnaby Joyce, the former Deputy Prime Minister. Barnaby Joyce, your response to what Lydia Thorpe said today?
Look, as much as I disagree with Prime Minister Albanese, he's not a fascist. He's not part of some clandestine plot. He has views. He has views I fervently disagree with, but I do not for one moment think that he is maligned, malicious, or has a criminal intent behind them. But what I do acknowledge is we have divided this show up. This was a very, very bad idea to come forward with something that was totally plausible, totally acceptable, and that's recognition of Indigenous Australians, and then to staple all these other things to it. The voice, basically a selected group of people with oversight over government based on the colour of your skin that's there in perpetuity. When they say consultation, it has no effect. Scarborough, $16 billion deal's been held up at the moment because of consultation processes. In my community, I was out at an Aboriginal, what was a former Aboriginal mission yesterday. This is making our lives so difficult, and we want to park this, we want to move on from it, and please don't ever do this to our nation again. Please do not do that.
It's just dreadful. It's tragic what's going on, Barnaby. It's with this voice referendum, and I fear for what's going to come after October 14, because win or lose, I think it will just step up the tension unless wiser heads prevail, particularly from the Prime Minister down. The Albanese government, just switching topics here, something else that really worried me. The Albanese government's rejoined the United Nations Green Climate Fund. That's a huge slush fund. It's meant to raise $100 billion a year from rich countries like us. $100 billion a year, and then, trust these officials to give that money wisely to mostly poorer countries. Foreign Minister Penny Wong said she'd hand over, and I quote, modest contribution later this year. And she says we're giving this cash to the UN's Climate Fund, not directly to our own projects overseas, because that, she says, is what Pacific countries want. Is any of this a smart thing to do?
Well, what I can say is, as we tie ourselves up to this, we are destroying our economy. The ludicrous idea that we can run a first world economy on wind towers is just ludicrous. And now this money, of course, is going to come out of your taxpayers' pockets, your viewers. And the question has to be asked in some instances, is this because people want the temperature to go down or their bank balance to go up? And, how do we follow these things through? How do we understand that there's no graft, no corruption, that it's not just going to one person who controls the finances of their country and surprise, ends up with their family. These things, like all things, another thing Jacinta Price got right. You need to audit these processes. You need to see exactly where the money goes. And you have to also say that in Australia, we've got a few issues on at the moment as well. We've got people who can't afford their power bills, can't afford their grocery bills, can't afford their fuel bills, can't afford their rent. And you've got a few problems at home. You really have. And we've got to start looking after some of the people who call Australia home and live here and whose families have always been here.
Oh, look, global warming has been such a rort for the Pacific leaders. They cry, our islands are drowning, even though most are stable or growing. And they count on white guilt to hand over splundoons, as you say. Who knows how much of it really ends up where it's supposed to. And I don't trust the UN to hand out our money. It should be us handing out our money, at least as a goodwill bribe, if you were. Barnaby Joyce, the Prime Minister, is going to China later this year. He's been given security advice not to take the RAAF plane because the communist regime will try to bug or hack it. But more worrying to me, I've just been watching incredible scenes, is that Chinese universities over the past few weeks have been putting up videos of their students doing things like war training. And the Chinese army has been releasing videos like this one of their military might and suggesting very clearly that they are now prepared for imminent war. Have a listen.
可以说，一旦启动一级战备，也就意味着随时将爆发大规模战争。
Imminent war, they said. Imminent preparedness. Is this a real threat, Barnaby? Are we doing enough to defend ourselves? Because I'm getting worried that we're here in a sort of daze, not expecting China to actually live up to what it's threatening.
Well, I think, as I always say, if you don't believe that if you ride the tiger that you won't end up in its belly, that's, and I think that is as true today as it was when it was first said. And what we also see with China, of course, is, you can judge them by their actions. South China Sea, their Tibet, their clashes with India on the border, their statements about Mongolia, their statements about territory that's actually part of Japan, their actions against the Philippines. We live in a different world. And that's why I've always said, from the moment I came back in the past as the Deputy Prime Minister, I started saying we've got to become as powerful as possible, as quickly as possible. And people said, don't say powerful because it scares people. And I said, OK, change it to strong. But it's the same. We have to become as strong as possible, as quickly as possible. That means you've got to prioritise. What is really important? Is it covering the country with wind factories and solar factories and transmission lines, or having cheap, affordable power? Is it sending money across to the UN so that they can dish it out to their mates and gosh knows where it ends up with? Or is it to make sure that our nation is as resilient as possible? Is it to sit back and reduce the amount of spending, actually reduce the overall amount of spending in defence? Or is it to say the world, unfortunately, has changed, and our number one job is to protect our people and to work with our allies in a formidable way so as not to create the war, but to make ourselves an absolutely and utterly resilient peace that no one would want to have a war with us, with our allies. Noting by ourselves, we are not strong enough, but with our allies, we are.
Can't agree with you more. A bully does not pick on someone who looks strong. They pick on someone who looks weak. And I think that we are looking weaker and weaker. Barnaby Joyce, thank you so much for your time.